في العالم الافتراضي تقريبا ما فيش شيء عبثي أو غير مدروس كما يبدو، ويكمن عمل حملة تحديداً اللي بيهدف لتمكين المجتمع المدني الفلسطيني من المناصرة الرقمية، مهمته رصد وتوثيق آلية عمل الشركات الكبرى المؤثرة عالمياً. وفي هذا السياق أصدر مركز حملة تقرير بعنوان رسم خريطة الفصل خرائط جوجل وحقوق الإنسان للفلسطينيين. لنشاهد هذا الفيديو معاً. أكيد التقارير والمواد موجودة على الموقع الإلكتروني الخاص في حملة. أردت أن أكون مراسلاً صحفياً، قالوا أنني صغير جداً. كنت أرغب في رواية قصص في جميع أنحاء إفريقيا، قالوا إنها خطيرة للغاية. أردت أن أبدأ شبكة عالمية من رواة القصص المتحركة، وقالوا إن ذلك مستحيل. لذلك فعلنا ذلك وحققنا ما نريد. هذا ما نشر من عدة أيام على صفحة لنروي قصصنا أو هاشتاج اور ستوريز. وفي هذه المحطة سعيدين بدعوة يوسف وسمية ليتحدثا عن تجربتهم بعنوان كيف غير فيديو السيلفي العالم. فليتفضلوا.
My name is Yusuf Omar and I'm a mojo, a mobile journalist. I wanted to be a foreign correspondent in Syria and they said I was too young. I wanted to tell stories across Africa and they said it was too dangerous. I wanted to start a global citizen journalism network and they said,
yeah, but this isn't journalism. I would die rather than do it. I don't want to watch it either. Curating selfies isn't journalism.
5 years old when it happened.
Look at these striking images. They're people wearing virtual face masks on Snapchat. Victims of sexual abuse in India are using them to remain anonymous so they can tell their harrowing stories.
More angles, more perspectives of hundreds of trained citizens creating stories that bring us together.
I'm living with HIV.
Imagine you get raped.
Skills changed my life.
Thousands of videos that challenge our understanding of the world. If the pen was mightier than the sword, mobile phones are our atomic agents of change. See, we're all trapped in this breaking news cycle. It all looks the same. Traditional media has credibility but lacks diversity. User-generated content has authenticity.
I want to be a journalist.
If we empower a generation of young people to tell stories with their phones, user-generated content can become so much more than breaking news and viral videos. Global stories from people's perspectives, change makers, innovators, unsung heroes. This is hashtag our story. If this isn't journalism, I don't know what the fuck is. Every time I come to Palestine, I know it might be the last time. Because the words I say on this stage and the stories I share on my page could be criminalized, called propaganda, in a publicity war designed to pander to the belief that Palestine doesn't exist. I'm told existence is resistance. People here hope for a future of coexistence. See, my wife is from South Africa. And 20-something years ago, after they beat the apartheid system, I've been and I've seen a politician, a preacher, and a woman who calls herself a true believer all speaking with conviction that we can end this evil. Putting Palestine on the map, keeping communities intact, using social media to fight back. Because I know for a fact that when people see stories, they react. The child turning tear gas canisters into art. Or the kid learning to code. It's so smart. Good storytelling can humanize, not normalize. The ability to create empathy and criticize. Because I've seen this occupation with my own eyes. Now, this is how, and I've seen how the media can hypnotize. Malcolm X once said, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you believing. Malcolm X once said that if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are oppressing. Share stories because you care, because you know misrepresentation is unfair. Now, I've been part of watching the opening discussion this morning, and it was really interesting to hear the real fear for storytellers and journalists in this part of the world, here in Palestine. The fear that people can be arrested, the fear that they can be tortured, the fear that they can be spending time in prison simply for sharing stories, simply for sharing truth, simply for witnessing some gross injustices of humanity. While that presentation was taking place, I saw people in this room who are in Palestine for the first time who were having second thoughts about the videos that they were sharing on social media. They were suddenly thinking, oh shit, I'm hearing about people getting arrested. Maybe I shouldn't be oversharing. I hope that the outcome of this event is not that. I hope this is not designed to scare people into thinking that we shouldn't be sharing. If anything, I believe that this presentation is going to look at how we should be sharing using our mobile devices.
My name is Sumaya Oma, and I'm co-founder of #OurStories. And #OurStories is a global network of citizen storytellers, of mobile journalists. And we tell global stories through people's perspectives. We've visited over 40 countries, and we've trained over 500 citizens to tell stories using their mobile phones. And the stories we tell are about change makers, innovators, and unsung heroes.
We've spent time in communities that have been ignored for too long, that haven't received enough press attention. We've empowered them with mobile journalism, how to shoot, edit, and produce using their mobile phones and tell stories. One example was in India. We were working with garbage collectors, people that collect and recycle garbage, completely ignored by the media. We trained them up how to use their phones, and then we didn't hear anything from them for like 10 months. We thought the training had failed. They weren't interested in making videos with their phones. The Indian government then raised the GST taxes on recyclable plastics. They made it more expensive to recycle plastics than it was to buy new plastics. And out of nowhere, we suddenly started seeing these garbage collectors, these waste pickers, using their mobile cameras to be heard. And through the work of activists and environmentalists and lobbyists, the government ended up reducing the GST tax. Their voices were heard. Hold down the right button for 10 seconds and take a video. We're doing a mobile journalism session here in Nizamuddin with the community.
He says, I'm not going to give up because I need to eat.
बहुत सारे कबाड़ी भाई लोग खड़े हैं और वो छटाई कर रही बस्ती है।
I'm with a lot of base pickers.
Teaching them Instagram stories so they can tell their stories.
Amplify.
We did a different project with a group of young women in a town called Bhatkal, India. All of the women in this community of about 50,000 cover their face. They wear the niqab. And of course, the story of niqab has existed in the media for a long time, right? We tell it over and over again, and generally it's told in the same kind of way. We speak to a right-wing politician who wants to ban the niqab in parts of Europe, and you might speak to one advocate who chooses to wear the niqab. But between these two extremes, there's an entire plethora, there's an entire spectrum of individuals who wear the niqab for various reasons. We empowered young women in India to tell their stories about why they choose to wear the niqab.
We're not allowed to do what we want to do.
From what age do the girls have to cover their face?
from 10 years.
I want to be a journalist.
A girl must be covered from head to feet as she reaches the adolescence.
Is this oppression or tradition? I was recently invited to Bhatkal in the south of India. It's a really conservative community of about 50,000 Muslims. And everywhere I went to speak, I asked the same question. Why are there no women in this room? There's not one woman in this room here today. Why were there no women here? And at every event, they gave the same answer.
Really isn't a lot of intermingling between the two sexes. One of the reasons why you haven't found a lot of women.
And then finally, I had the opportunity to do a workshop with a group of schoolgirls. Assalamu alaikum! What is this place called? Behind the veils, these are real girls with real names and real ambitions.
My name is Mazia. Umra. Aina. Kulsum. Raja. Amara. Ilfa. Ilaf.
And what do you want to do when you finish school?
Doctor. Artist. Civil officer. Software engineer. Lawyer. Teacher.
Everybody wants to be a doctor in this room.
I want to be a journalist. I want to be a journalist.
But here is the problem.
We're not supposed to use social media.
Why?
Our elders don't allow us to use.
Why not?
Ask them.
What else are we not allowed?
We're not allowed to do what we want to do because it comes under our family's name. Because it says it's so-and-so's daughter, so-and-so's granddaughter. They're not allowed to do what we want to do.
This is rubbish. And what about the boys?
Boys, they're given more freedom than the girls.
And how are we going to fix it?
We'll have to try with the journalism.
I asked the girls what issues they had in their communities, and there were many. But the niqab, or the covering of the face, wasn't one of them.
And people think that they are forced to wear it, but that isn't the case.
Hijab is our choice. Hijab is not just a piece of cloth, it is a way of life.
We cover ourselves to avoid the unwanted gaze because face is the focus of temptation and desire.
Myself, Ariba, I would like to be called as a proud hijabi. Shukran.
But when I asked some of the men and teachers who work in the schools and madrasas if the niqab is compulsory, they said,
A girl must be covered from head to feet. During the time of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they used to open only one eye so that they could see the road.
The niqab is a complicated issue. For some, it's a choice. For others, it seems like a cultural expectation.
Thank you so much.
So a year ago, we were here and we did a lot of training and we did stories on #Palestine. And one of the things that we saw about the posts that we did and about the stories that we did, that the most engaged ones, the stories that connected with people were the stories of Palestinians doing things against all odds, not ignoring problems, but highlighting solutions. And this is what we call constructive journalism, and that's what we focus on. Here's a problem in society, and here are people doing something about it. Here are people living beyond that.
So, for example, we met these kids who wanted to tell the story of Palestine and occupation, wanted to tell the story of checkpoints, but didn't necessarily want to do it in a long-form read or even in a video. But what if they could create a video game? These girl gamers are sharing their culture using video games.
I make a game about life in Palestine, how people suffered to go to the university.
We told the story of marathon runners in Bethlehem, trying to complete a 42-kilometer marathon, but not having a long enough stretch available to them in this part of the world with checkpoints.
To resist the occupation with my running shoes, some people choose to do it with a stone. And each one of us have the right to defend his country and protect ourselves.
We told us even the simplest stories. Right here in Ramallah, we found a little fruit and veg truck, the first fruit and veg truck in Ramallah, and a lot of their products are supporting Palestinian farmers.
I like to shop here because all the things here are organic. We come here to support the Palestinian products.
So Palestine has skipped entire technological generations. A lot of you may not have even had ADSL or a dial-up connection. And that's because your first taste of the World Wide Web, of the internet, was through the mobile phone. And that's an advantage. While the rest of the world is trapped in these labor-intensive story and news gathering processes, there's an opportunity to use mobile journalism, to use this tool to tell your stories.
Absolutely, and it's going to be this mobile tool that we all have in our pockets that is going to change the perception and the narrative around Palestine. I think for the longest of time, we've been waiting for big news organizations to tell the true story of what's happening here. we need to start taking ownership of that narrative, and we have to start doing it with our mobile devices. As Sumaya says, the trajectory, I believe, for Palestine is bright in terms of the ability to communicate stories. And one of the reasons for that is that ability to skip generations. One of the technologies that we're most excited about at the moment here is the ability to use social virtual reality, social VR. The ability to put on a virtual reality headset and immerse yourself in somebody else's life. So somebody in New York can get a sense what it's like to be in Gaza. They can live that space. They can actually interact and meet and touch things in that environment. We've started experimenting in the space.
This is Palestine's first ever Facebook Live news show. We're going to be showing you all sorts of things from across the West Bank. It's a story of kids that are being arrested and kept in prison for months. Land over the years, the land mass has become smaller and smaller and smaller. Not negative, but constructive. Constructive journalism, that's what this show is all about. You're watching #Palestine. This is Ramallah. How cool is that? This is Ramallah, and I'm going to plonk that in the middle, and voila, the environment changes like that. This young girl was arrested literally in the dead of the night. You have been watching #Palestine, a #Our Stories production.
These technologies are getting cheaper and cheaper. The internet's getting faster and faster. The gap between what the BBC or any of these big organizations can do and what you guys can do with your own technologies is getting smaller and smaller. You guys want to see how to do a couple of these things yourself? No time?
Oh, we out of time.
Oh, shit. Okay, grab me in the lunch break or the next break. I'll do a little workshop. We're going to be heading to Jenin. We're going to be heading to Haifa. If you can't make it there, let's chat here. Thanks so much for your time, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
شكرا سمية ويوسف، واكيد في وقت بالاستراحات، وكمان زي ما ذكر انه يوم الخميس رح يكون عندهم ورشه بجنين، ويوم الجمعه رح يكون عندهم حيفا. بالاضافه انه بتقدروا تشوفوا كل الورشات الموجوده، في 16 ورشه رح يكونوا خلال اليومين اللي جايين. رح ننتقل للجلسه الثانيه. الجلسه الثانيه بعنوان توجهات دوليه في الدفاع عن الحقوق الرقميه وانعكاسها على السياق الفلسطيني. نطلب من المتحدثين ومدير الجلسه الاستاذ نديم الناشف مدير مركز حمله المركز العربي لتطوير الاعلام الاجتماعي يتفضل. وحول كيفية تعزيز الحقوق الرقمية من خلال المناصرة والأطر الأممية السيدة ديبرا بروان من مؤسسة الاتصالات التقدمية. أتمنى حكيت اسمها. ديبرا اعتذرت، هلا كمان نديم أكيد بحكي لنا أكيد. وحول النظام الأوروبي لحماية البيانات العامة GDPR وأثره العالمي على الحقوق الرقمية جوناثان مايكلي، ولمحة عن نضال منظمة العفو الدولية لصالح الحقوق الرقمية ومناهضة المراقبات. صالح حجازي هو نائب مدير برنامج الشرق الأوسط وشمال إفريقيا في منظمة العفو الدولية. رح يكون معنا ساعة. وضرار غانم أيضاً. حارث عم بنقلني. خلص تمام. معنا من بلد فلسطين ضرار غانم، يتفضل على المسرح. نديم اكيد انت.
ايدن ايمانوفيتش من مؤسسه برايفسي انترناشونال. اسفين شوي على الخربطه، بس كان بعض التغييرات في الجلسه. طيب، مرحبا للجميع. بيسعدني ادير الجلسه الثانيه لمنتدى النشاط الرقمي، منتدى فلسطين للنشاط الرقمي. الجلسة زي ما ذكر راح تكون عن موضوع أو تحت عنوان التوجهات الدولية في الدفاع عن الحقوق الرقمية وانعكاسها على السياق الفلسطيني. بالواقع احنا بنحكي إذا بنحاول هيك نلقي نظرة على السنة اللي فاتت وعلى سنة 2018 وبايش اتسمت والتوجهات المختلفة. بنحكي عموما عن حالة اللي احنا بنشوفها كناس اللي هم مدافعين عن الحقوق الرقمية، عن وضع اللي فيه عمليا بنرجع لورا من ناحية حقوق الإنسان عموما عالميا. إذا بسنوات سابقة وبعقود سابقة كانت الحكومات على الأقل على مستوى الادعاء يعني تدعي أنها تحافظ على حقوق الإنسان وبتهتم بحقوق الإنسان وبتهتم بالحقوق الرقمية، فإحنا اليوم موجودين بأوضاع اللي فيها الحكومات يعني لا تدعي ذلك، وإنما يعني بتنتهك وبشكل واضح وبدون أي حتى نبرة اعتذارية. وبضمن ذلك كمان كل موضوع الحقوق الرقمية. الحقوق الرقمية احنا بنلاحظ أكثر وأكثر خصوصا من عام 2015 أكثر وأكثر محاولات سيطرة على هذا الحيز الافتراضي، محاولة لمنع حرية التعبير عن الرأي، منع أي نقد اتجاه هاي الحكومات، وحجب مواقع بكميات، حجب تطبيقات بعض الحكومات زي ما بنعرف، وفي مواقع كمان تحجب فقط لأنه مثلا تعريف رئيس حكومي معين أو رئيس دولة معين ما عجبوش التعريف، فبالتالي بروح بحجب. فسهولة الحجب وسهولة منع التطبيقات عم بتكون أكثر وأكثر. كمان بنلاحظ وخصوصا في منطقتنا العربية يعني موجة قوانين عمليا اللي جاي لمكافحة الجرائم الإلكترونية، ولكن للأسف يعني بوضعها الطبيعي هاي القوانين جاي تحمي المواطن. في منطقتنا العربية وفي بعض المناطق حول العالم احنا بنشوف انه هاي القوانين عمليا جاي لتحمي الحكومة من المواطن، وتحمي الحاكم وتمنع حرية التعبير عن الرأي، وبالأساس وظيفتها بتكون عمليا تجريم النشطاء وتجريم المدافعين عن الحقوق الرقمية وحقوق الإنسان، أو أي صوت طبعا نقدي تجاه هاي الحكومة. في بعض الأحيان حتى في بعض الدول العربية كمان كل موضوع الحقوق الرقمية يعني أساس الحقوق الرقمية لما بنحكي هو طبعا المنالية، هو الوصول للإنترنت بهدف أنك تقدر توصل للمعلومة. فحتى هذا الشيء بطل شيء يعني مفهوم ضمنا، وبعض الأحيان بتم قطع الإنترنت. يعني بالعام 2018 مثلا كان في حالات غريبة لقطع الإنترنت وحجج غريبة، يعني أثناء امتحانات التوجيهي في الجزائر وفي العراق قطعوا الإنترنت ليمنعوا النقل داخل الامتحانات وداخل الصفوف. فطبعا هذا جدا شيء سيء وتوجه سيء وعمليا تدهور ورجوع للوراء. في الجانب الآخر احنا بنشوف كمان شركات الإنترنت ومنصات التواصل الاجتماعي عم تتواطأ أكثر وأكثر مع الحكومات وبتتفاعل معها أكثر ما بتتفاعل مع حقوق المستخدمين عندها. فواحدة من الحالات اللي انشهرت كثير هي قضية الروهينجا في الميانمار. يعني احنا بنعرف انه الأمم المتحدة أطلعوا تقرير على كل قضية كيف شركة فيسبوك ما منعت التحريض اللي تم على الروهينجا، واحنا بنعرف ان النتيجة بعد حملة التحريض اللي كانت عمليا نتائج كارثية بأي معيار. فمن جهة عمليا هاي الشركات بمصالحها الاقتصادية عمليا هي بتتعلق بالحكومات، فبالتالي بتحاول تساير. واحنا طبعا بنعرف بشكل كثير منيح هذا بواقعنا الفلسطيني، وبنعرف شركات التواصل الاجتماعي وخصوصا فيسبوك كيف بتتعاون بشكل كثيف مع حكومة الاحتلال الإسرائيلية. ولكن أيضا في سؤال الخصوصية طلع هاي السنة بالعام 2018 كثيرا سأل سؤال الخصوصية وقديش هاي الشركات عم بتحافظ على خصوصية مستخدمينها، خصوصا بعد فضيحة كامبريدج أناليتيكا وقضايا ثانية اللي أثيرت بالعالم وخصوصا بالولايات المتحدة بهاي الحالة، بس هي طبعا بتأثر على الكل. فتطورات كثيرة اللي بتصير تساؤلات، يعني احنا كمدافعين عن الحقوق الرقمية شو دورنا، شو دور المجتمع المدني، كيف ممكن ندافع عن حالنا أكثر، عن خصوصيتنا أكثر كمستخدمين وكنشطاء. ومنحاول من خلال هاي الجلسة مع الإخوان نتطرق لكل هاي المواضيع. راح يشاركنا بالجلسة إيدن إيمانوفيتش اللي هو من مؤسسة برايفيس انترناشونال، المؤسسة اللي معروفة بشغلها البحثي والآخر بالدفاع عن الحقوق الرقمية، وخصوصا بكل موضوع الرقابة ورقابة الدول على المستخدمين. ومعنا كمان جوناثان ماكولي اللي هو مستشار قانوني لديجيتال فريدم فاند، مؤسسة اللي كمان بتشتغل على كل موضوع المرافعة داخل المحاكم خصوصا الأوروبية منها، على كل القوانين اللي عم بتصير اللي بذات علاقة بكل موضوع الحقوق الرقمية. معنا كمان درار غانم من مؤسسة ومؤسس شريك في ابني فلسطين بالفلسطيني، اللي هي المؤسسة الريادية بكل موضوع كراود فاندينج وتجميع وتجنيد الموارد عمليا المنصة الفلسطينية الأولى. وعمليا دخلوا كمان كل الفكرة أكثر وأكثر على بالسياق الفلسطيني لجمع التبرعات من خلال الإنترنت. ومعنا صالح حجازي نائب مديرة برامج الشرق الأوسط وشمال أفريقيا في منظمة العفو الدولية أمنستي، اللي هي غنية عن التعريف كمؤسسة حقوقية معروفة، واللي خلال السنة الفائتة كمان تعرضت هي بنفسها والباحثين اللي بيشتغلوا في هاي المؤسسة لرقابة من تكنولوجيا ترقب ورصد، اللي أكيد يعني صالح رح يحكي عنها أكثر، اللي هي يعني من شركة إسرائيلية اللي اشترتها الحكومة السعودية. وكل القضية هاي كمان رح نعرضها معنا في الجلسة. إذن بنبدأ مع جوناثان ماكولي مستشار قانوني لديجيتال فريدم فاند اللي راح يحدثنا عن النظام الأوروبي لحماية البيانات العامة GDPR وأثره على الحقوق العالمية. تفضل جوناثان.
I'd just like to start before I get into my talk. I'd like to thank the organisers for having me here. I'd also like to thank the interpreters at the back who are going to be struggling over the next 10 minutes with my Irish accent. So thank you very much in advance for that. So I'm going to talk about the general data protection regulation in the European Union. But I just thought I'd start with a bit of context. In 2016, the UN said that the same rights that individuals enjoy offline should also be protected online. And 2 years since that was said, we can see that there are huge systemic violations of digital rights across the globe, and many of them have been mentioned today, from arbitrary arrests of individuals for what they post online, internet shutdowns that censor citizens, mass and indiscriminate surveillance techniques that are often used to monitor and control citizens. And in the past, we've always talked about human rights law or human rights issues as citizens against the state. But as we see with these examples, there is another entity in the equation, and that's private entities, private organizations. So it's not just governments that are interfering with or violating our rights, it's also the policies, practices and business models of certain private entities. Certain social media sites or information and communication technologies collect huge amounts of data, huge amounts of information about us, and they can actually glean from that quite a lot of information about our daily lives, what we like, what we don't like, who we talk to, who our family members are. They can even tell, without you disclosing to them, whether you're falling in love or out of love with somebody else. So this is incredibly valuable information that they hold on huge numbers of individuals across the globe. And with that information comes power. And that power can be exploited and can lead to human rights violations. And that's why the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, is so important, because it provides an effective means of holding private entities to account for the human rights violations, specifically violations of the right to privacy that they're responsible for. So essentially it's a human rights instrument. It's protecting personal data. And when they talk about personal data, that is a hugely vague or general term. It's basically any information about a person, whether they're identified or they could be identifiable from that information. So it could be your IP address, your name, obviously, your location. It could be a photograph of yourself. It could be your job title. But it could be your relationship status or your political opinion as well. So obviously we're not in the EU, so why should we here today care about the General Data Protection Regulation? How is it relevant to us? It applies to organizations that are established in the EU. So that essentially means they carry out activities in the EU. The data processing, so the use that they make of your personal data, doesn't actually have to take place in the EU. And most surprisingly, to me anyway, that data doesn't have to belong to or be of an EU citizen or resident. So in November last year, the European Data Protection Board said any personal data processing in the context of the activities of an establishment in the EU would fall under the regulation, regardless of the location or the nationality of the data subject whose personal data is being processed. So that means that, in theory at least, everyone in this room today should benefit from this EU regulation, provided their data is being processed by an entity that's carrying out activities in the EU, which will include huge numbers of social media outlets and information and communication technologies that have some sort of presence within the EU. It also applies to organizations who have no presence in the EU, but if they're targeting EU citizens in certain ways. And this has caught out a number of companies and organizations outside the EU, including US-based companies. And I also read recently some Israeli companies had not realized that they might fall under the GDPR. So it has a potential to benefit huge numbers of individuals across the globe. It's really a global piece of legislation protecting privacy and your personal data. It's also the gold standard in many ways in terms of how strongly it protects your privacy. And I would recommend people actually read it and maybe think about advocating or campaigning for similar laws to be brought in other jurisdictions to give a heightened level of protection for personal data. So I'm just going to briefly go through what it actually says, since I haven't said very much about that. How does it protect information about us? First, information about you can only be processed by organizations lawfully, fairly, and in a transparent manner. It should be clear what your data is being used for, and data about yourself cannot be collected, or organizations cannot collect more than they need about you. So for job applications, for example, or purchasing an item, they don't need to know your date of birth, for example. The data needs to be accurate. It should only be stored for a limited amount of time. It can't be stored for years and years after the activity has been carried out. And the data must be processed securely and under confidentiality. And organizations must ensure that there are security measures in place to ensure that your data is not hacked, it's not leaked, it's not damaged or lost, whether by accident or on purpose. And so it places quite strong obligations on ICT companies to make sure that your data is secure. It also gives data subjects, individuals whose data is being used by organizations, a huge number of rights, very specific rights that are almost rights that fall under your right to privacy more generally. You have a right to be informed about when your data is being collected, why it's being collected, by who it's being shared, and how long it's being kept for. You also have a right to access it, which is almost like a freedom of information right. You can find out who's collecting your data by writing to them and asking them, what data of mine do you hold? Can you send it to me? You have a right to rectify your data if it's inaccurate. You have a right to erase it if it's being collected or used in an unlawful manner. You have a right to move your data across different platforms, different online environments. So you can take your data from Facebook and move it over to another social media platform if you want to use another one. And that should happen securely. You have a right to object to your data being used in certain ways, for example, direct marketing and other forms of targeting. And you've also got the right to object to your data being used in automated decision making, so through artificial intelligence. If a decision is made against you by a machine that's going to affect your legal rights in some way, you have a right to object to that. That's highly restricted under the law. So I'm just kind of scraping the surface of this kind of new development for the EU. And hopefully this kind of conveys to you that it is relevant actually to everybody across the globe. It could apply potentially to anybody. Also more generally, it's hopefully going to make certain companies and organizations sit up and listen, because never before have these kinds of fines or penalties been imposed against organizations for not respecting and protecting people's privacy. Fines under this law can reach 20 million, or is it 20 million euros, or 4% of a company's global turnover. So in the case of Facebook, for example, that could be as much as 1 billion euros. So hopefully they're going to start sitting up and listening, and we're going to see greater protection of data protection and privacy online, but much of that proof will be in the pudding, so to speak. It'll come down to enforcement and whether we will actually be able to enforce our rights against private entities. Yeah, sorry.
تمام. لكل متحدث أنا يمكن ما ذكرتهاش ففي 10 دقائق وشكرا جوناثان على تلخيص كل موضوع GDPR. ومنكمل مع درار على كل موضوع الكراود فاندنج في فلسطين.
مرحبا، شكرا نديم. فعليا اليوم أنا جاي أحكي عن موضوع المنصات المالية زي باي بال وسترايب، وشو أثرها على حقوقنا إحنا الرقمية، شو أثرها على حقوقنا بموضوع تجنيد الأموال ومشاركتنا بالاقتصاد العالمي. فبداية نعرف إنه أو عندنا فكرة هون بفلسطين إنه منصة زي باي بال ما بتشتغل، فأنا معناته كإنسان بدي أتعامل مع السوق العالمي، بدي أبيع وأشتري، ما بقدر. والإشي كمان مع سترايب منصة تانية. اليوم سترايب تقدر تعطيكم سيرفيس إنها تسجل اسم الشركة في أمريكا على أساس أنت تقدر تفتح حساب على أساس تقدر تتعامل مع السوق العالمي. فهذا من ناحية اقتصادية وبزنس. طب إيش مع موضوع المجتمع المدني؟ إيش مع دور المنصات هاي وتأثيرها على المجتمع المدني وعلى شغل المؤسساتي؟ طبعا احنا بدنا نحكي في ظل الواقع الفلسطيني، الواقع اللي احنا كمان بنعرف انه هو محكوم بالمركزية اللي قائمة على المركزية والمؤسساتية اللي داعم البلد. بمعنى آخر كل المصاري اللي عم تدخل على البلد، كل المال اللي بتدخل على البلد هي مركزي. وبنعرف إنه هاي المركزية مش مضمونة. بنعرف إنه الUSAID قطعت $500 مليون عنا. وكمان إشي بنعرف إنه تيجي مع أجندات ما إلنا إحنا دور فعليا بالمشاريع اللي بتيجي، إحنا بس بننفذ. ففي ظل هذا الكونتكست وهذا الموضوع، شو حقنا إحنا على أساس ناخذ نوع من الاستقلالية والحق بالقرار بشو بدنا نعمل بمؤسساتنا وبشغلنا؟ كيف ممكن نستغل ونشتغل مع منصات المالية الموجودة اليوم على أساس يعني نأخذ استقلاليتنا؟ فهي بعض الأسئلة اللي اليوم أنا جاي أطرحها وأفكر في بعض التحديات اللي فيها. وفعليا يعني بقدر أبلش في بعض التحديات اللي شفناهم من خلال التجربة. أولها في عنا موضوع اللي هو التمويل الجماعي نعرفه في البلد. لقينا الطرق اللي نقدر ندخل مال عن طريق التمويل الجماعي. من خلال بالفلسطيني عرفنا ندخل أكثر من 200,000 خلال السنتين الماضيين، وفي منصات تانية قدرت تدخل مال هنا. بس بالرغم من هيك في كتير حواجز. بحب يعني بعد النقاش هذا فكرنا فيها، هي حواجز إلكترونية فعليا. لسه علينا حواجز في مجال الافتراضي، في المساحة الافتراضية لسه في علينا حواجز. فهذا تحدي واحد. نعرف إنه في كتير حملات تمويل تم جمع المال وبعدين ما تمش تسليمه. هذا واحد من التحديات. التحدي الثاني اللي موجود عندنا كمؤسسات هو موضوع بسيط، donate button. تقدر كبسة تقدر تعمل donation لمؤسسة. هاي مش موجودة عندنا اليوم. طب ليش ما نقدر احنا نتفاعل مع الأفراد اللي بيجوا عنا على المؤسسات، اللي بيستفيدوا من خدماتنا والسيرفيسز اللي بنقدمها؟ ليش ما يقدروا هم يدعمونا؟ ليش مش متوفرة؟ طبعا في جهات شغالة على الموضوع، الجزئية الثالثة اللي هي وتحدي كبير هو موضوع التراست، الثقة، والتيروريزم، الإرهاب. علينا ليبل إنه إحنا إرهابية. بعطيكم مثال، إنه أنا حاولت أودي مصاري أول ما بلشنا المشروع، حاولنا نودي $5000 لغزة لمشروع إسعاف أولي. حكولنا إنه واحد من مؤسسين المؤسسة الدايركتور is affiliated to Hamas. Who's not affiliated to Hamas in Gaza. عفوا. فتحدي، ما في trust، ما بنقدر نحول. فعنا هدول التحديات اللي عم نواجهها على اساس نقدر ناخذ استقلاليتنا. عم نحارب على اساس نقدر نجمع ونجند الاموال وننظم حالنا، وبالرغم من هيك مش عارفين. يعني مش انه مش عارفين، بس اهم تحدي من كل هدول التحديات بتخيل هو موضوع الوعي انه بالرغم من وجود هدول الحواجز الموجودة على الانترنت، لساتنا بنقدر ننظم حالنا، ولساتنا بنقدر نلاقي طرق مختلفة على أساس نوصل ونجند ونتفاعل. وأنا اليوم يعني رسالتي هي فعليا إنه إحنا كأصحاب مؤسسات شو دورنا بهذا العمل، وين صوتنا، كيف نقدر، وين صوتنا بالتجنيد هذا، كيف إحنا بنقدر نتفاعل أكتر مع الأفراد اللي بنخدمهم والشبكات اللي إحنا موجودة عنا، ونبتعد عن القيود الموجودة عنا من المؤسسات الأخرى. يعني إحنا معروفين دائما نلاقي طريق. هذا هو فعليا اللي أنا جاي أشاركه اليوم معاكم، هو أكتر إنه مزبوط في تحديات وحقوقنا مأخوذة وحنضلنا نحارب فيها، بس هاي هي النقاط الرئيسية اللي يعني موجودة عنا اليوم.
شكرا درار، شكرا لتوضيح كل موضوع التمويل الجماعي والإشكاليات والعقبات الموجودة في جمع التبرعات لقضايا فلسطينية مختلفة اللي كلياتنا عم نواجهها. وبفكر كمان يعني بمركز حملة أصدرنا مؤخرا كل موضوع تقرير على كل موضوع بيبال وعدم عملهم، وفي حملات كثيرة من عدة أطراف اللي انعملت بالسنين السابقة، وفكر هذا موضوع مهم اللي لازم ينعمل فيه جهد لقدام نحاول نغير هذا الواقع. والآن بننتقل لإيدن اللي راح يحكينا عن كل موضوع الرصد والمراقبة.
Thank you, Nadim, and thank you very much for inviting us here today. Privacy International is an international human rights campaign organisation. We have been based in London for the last 25 years, where we've campaigned across most privacy and surveillance issues that you could possibly think of, with varying degrees of success. 25 years ago, it was a lot different. If you're on your phone at the moment, look at your caller history, your caller ID history. It says who has called you and who you have called recently. This might seem like something trivial nowadays, but actually this was a feature and a technology that had to be invented and that had to be installed through laws. 25 years ago, this was the kind of issue that Privacy International was campaigning on. Now we're campaigning across government agencies who have access to mass data about everyone's communications all the time. Since those 25 years, we've campaigned on issues like ID cards and 4 data protection laws that Jonathan spoke about recently. To that end, we use research and advocacy. We publish reports about companies selling surveillance technologies. We do lobbying and litigation. We take governments to court. We've had some successes in the European courts against the UK Intelligence Agency, for example, and we work with partners around the world to try and coordinate and help with their work in Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and here with Hamla in Palestine. in terms of emerging threats to privacy, I want to talk about three things. Number one is the increasing climate for censorship and for platforms to spy on their users. Two, the neo-colonial export of censorship and surveillance tools by powerful countries. And three, the increasing use of advanced biometric tools around the world. So as some background, I started in Privacy International nearly 6 years ago when the world was somewhat different. It was in the aftermath of the Arab Spring, which showed really how social media and the internet can be used by activists to not only raise awareness, but to organize and to actually bring about real change to their countries. During that time, you had the development of the idea of internet freedom, and which gained mass support from Western countries in particular and activists around the world because of the influence that it can have. And this led to the notion that your digital rights are human rights and that surveillance and censorship are essentially violation of your human rights. 1 week after I started, however, a US intelligence contractor called Edward Snowden began leaking documents showing how the extent to which some of these Western governments which had supported internet freedom were actually some of its worst enemies. The Snowden documents showed how the US intelligence agency had been conducting mass internet surveillance and phone spying around the world, working with intelligence agencies in other countries to spy in Israel, within the UK, and around the world. As a result of these disclosures, a lot of the privacy conversations and digital rights in Europe and the US were taken up with these issues, leading to a number of court cases and some modest reforms and rollbacks in terms of surveillance capabilities available to US and Western intelligence agencies. Move forward 5 years after that, and the climate is very different again. Recently, we've had the election of Donald Trump, rise of populist movements, and these events have yet again highlighted the role of social media and the internet, but in a more negative light. So we've seen a lot of conversations about the role of the internet for allowing foreign interference, especially by Russia in the US, for allowing the spread of fake news material, and also for facilitating echo chambers whereby people are only talking to the audience with which they already agree. What this has led to is a lot of pressure on platforms around the world to censor and spy on their users. However, the main problem with this, as you'll all be aware, is that free speech and censorship is a matter of interpretation, and the people who make those interpretations are the ones with power. So as a result of this rhetoric, we've seen a range of cybersecurity laws passed around the world, including in the MENA region and in Israel and Palestine, which claim to use these threats online essentially to spy on people for the government and not for the citizens themselves, as Nadeem had mentioned. The second major trend I want to talk about was the rise of China as a major influence in terms of how the internet looks like and in terms of how they're exporting surveillance and censorship around the world. What this has led to is now a neo-colonial battle between the US, China, and Europe to try and stamp their vision of the internet around the world in various countries. We've seen China recently providing physical hardware and technical assistance to governments around the world, enabling them to carry out censorship and spying. A lot of this was developed in its western Xinjiang region, where Chinese technology has now made the Muslim minority population there arguably one of the most surveilled peoples in the history of the world. So similar to the way that Europe, Israel, US uses spying technology and then packages it up and allows companies to sell it around the world to others, China is now using advanced biometric tools and others it has developed in this region and spreading it around the world. Which brings me to the third major threat that I want to talk about today, which is this increasing use of advanced biometrics around the world. So biometrics is essentially a physical measurement of a person, be it their face, their iris, or their fingertips. The technology is developed as such that you can collect this relatively easy now. And the threat is that businesses and countries are rushing to install such biometrics technologies into their products and into cities, so streets, transport, and shops. And the problem here is that once a biometrics is collected, it generates data. And once you have so many data sets, you're then able to build a complete picture of people's movements and their patterns, which is then made available to businesses and government agencies alike. So I think in Palestine, you've had facial recognition being used, for example, in the mosque in East Jerusalem and elsewhere. So I think those three things are really some of the most important emerging threats we've had: the increasing climate for censorship, new countries and existing countries that are exporting authoritarian models of the internet around the world, and the increasing use of censorship, biometrics. These three things really make it a very dangerous climate for activists such as myself and others around the world to be doing this work. But it's also a very crucial time to be doing it, because the technologies, solutions, and the laws which activists come up with now will not only impact massively on how the internet will look like in a few years, but they'll impact hugely on how politics and the world will look like in a few years and in the future in ways that we don't yet understand. How those solutions come about is obviously the difficult thing, and what I'll say to that is that they have to come in from activists such as yourselves related to their individual context. So the general data protection regulation might work in some countries, but it might not work in here, for example. So it has to come from you guys, which I think is really important for us to be here and to hear about your situation and what's happening here.
شكرا ايدن. يعني بفكر جدا مثير نشوف المقارنات او كيف العالم كمان كله بيرتبط بهاي الصناعات، صناعات المراقبه والتكنولوجيا المراقبه. احنا بنعرف كمان انه في عده تكنولوجيات اللي بيتم تطبيقها واستعمالها على الفلسطينيين. يعني ايدن حكى على النموذج الاقليه المسلمه في الصين وكيف الحكومه الصينيه بتعمل على تطبيق هاي التكنولوجيات واستخدامها عليهم، ومن ثم بتبيعها لانحاء مختلفه من العالم. بفكر نفس الشيء عم بيصير معنا كمان هون في السياق الفلسطيني، والحكومه الاسرائيليه اللي بتطبق تكنولوجيات رصد ومراقبه على الفلسطينيين، ومن ثم هاي التكنولوجيا بتنباع بكل انحاء العالم. نكمل حديثنا مع الاخ صالح اللي راح يحكي على كمان بهذا السياق، سياق المراقبه وتجربه امنستي بهذا الموضوع. تفضل.
شكرا نديم، شكرا جميعا للحضور وحمله. انا اعذروني رح تكون المداخله تبعتي بالانجليزي، حضرتها وما لحقتش اترجمها. So let me switch to English. What I have to say actually comes in a perfect place after what you said. I'll be speaking about surveillance, particularly as surveillance relates to human rights defenders. Often in discussion on technology, human rights and law, we lose focus on those who are impacted the most, including human rights defenders. Human rights defenders, particularly those working on difficult issues or seen as pushing boundaries of cultural norms, find themselves at the sharp end of government tactics to repress their work. Surveillance is no different. States have ever emerging and ever adapting repressive set of tools that they are using. Intensified efforts to silence dissent over the world by governments, armed groups, companies, any power that is used various aggressive, impunitive measures to silence the critical voices that they fear are attacking their own interests and own power. It is simply one of the newer tools that states use to monitor, intimidate, discredit, harm, and sometimes kill human rights defenders. Surveillance, mass and targeted, is an important tool for oppressors and those who want to keep power. It facilitates the complete exclusion of those who didn't have access to power in the first place, or it takes it from those who have a tentative hold. We know governments are buying spyware from private companies, whether it's Citizen Labs' exposure of Fin Fisher investigation. This is one thing just to keep in mind if you're interested. Gamma selling government of Bahrain, And the question is, do we know enough? Closer to home, NSO, an Israeli-based company, is selling Pegasus, it's a software, it's surveillance software, to countries around the world, some of which have been particularly bad human rights records. And in many cases, it has been exposed by Amnesty and others to be used against human rights defenders. Important to note that the common rhetoric from states and companies alike is that the surveillance tools are used only for fighting crime and terrorism. However, it is clear that human rights defenders targeted by these tools do not fit these categories. Their only crime is supporting and fighting for justice and human rights. The impact on civil society and human rights defenders of surveillance are many. While it is traditionally assumed that the only harm is an invasion of privacy, which is right, and human rights defenders is spied on and so their private information is illegally accessed, the reality of the harm is so much broader. At Amnesty International, we believe that there is harm to civil society even if there is no active infection of a defender's device. And it is probably the case that states and companies in the surveillance business knowingly capitalize on the pervasive, by its very nature, clandestine nature of technology to scare human rights defenders from communicating with each other. One woman human rights defender we have worked with in Pakistan, who was targeted with an aggressive targeted surveillance campaign, became so worried that any attempts to communicate with her, in fact, she shut it down, basically. This is one example. The time and resources it takes to identify these kinds of cases and then do adequate follow-up with a human rights defender and their wider civil society are significant. Resources that could have been instead used on the defender's primary human rights work. It is also important to remember that the increase in digital surveillance against human rights defenders and civil society is not happening in a vacuum. It is happening alongside increasingly aggressive vilification and criminalization of human rights defense work. It is easier for states and companies involved to justify human rights defenders as targets when they have spent years criminalizing their legitimate human rights work. Information illegally obtained from human rights defenders is also often used to fuel smear campaigns against them. A good example of this was highlighted in a recent report by Amnesty International on Uzbekistan and the case of, I don't want to go too much into it, I think it's going to take time. I had it on a slide, sorry. The case of content industry, Dimitri, and there is, sorry, I'll skip that. If anybody's interested, you can ask me about it and I'll tell you. Oh, no, there we go. Galima, the name of the human rights defender. Digital surveillance is also particularly damaging because, like most technology, it crosses borders. This makes it even more dangerous for human rights defenders. So this interesting case from Uzbekistan is the case of Galima, editor of uznews.net, which was one of the few sources of independent news in Uzbekistan. She was exiled and had to continue her important work in Germany. Even in Germany, she was targeted with the nasty smear campaigns. Websites were set up which hosted images that had been digitally altered with her face on pornographic images. Pornographic websites made with her face to discredit her work. This primed her to become the subject of a phishing attack. She received a notification that her Google account had been illegally distributing pornography. She followed the link, and as she thought it was to do these with the previous incidences, but it wasn't Google. It was a phishing attack. Her adversary gained access to her account and released the entire content of her account in an attempt to discredit her. They were successful and her website was shut down. We need to do more to respond. If we want to keep human rights defenders community alive and functional, we need to show that there is a way to hold these governments and companies to account. At Amnesty International, I'll tell you what we do in this regard. In Amnesty International, we employ a number of strategies against surveillance of human rights defenders and civil society. One, we research and publish highly innovative technical research outputs in an effort to continuously expose the methods, tools, technologies being used to attack civil society. We also, to do this, our technologists carry out internet infrastructure mapping and social media data investigations to identify the technical fingerprints of the surveillance tools being used, as well as number of additional technical research skills and methods. We also work with civil society partners to do security audits, investigate attempts on them and their accounts, and to provide frontline defense against these kinds of attacks. The team builds on this technical information with more traditional research skills to unearth the impact on the individuals involved in the wider quieting effect of the human rights movement. The impact of our work is immediate, meaning we working with third-party service providers to quickly and effectively shut down active attacks against civil society, and it's also lasting, raising the exposure of companies that prefer to operate in darkness, and it's also empowering, building on our research to launch strategic litigation against those who build, sell, facilitate the use of these technologies to governments trying to quiet human rights. I'll stop here. Thank you.
شكرا صالح. والآن في فقرة الأسئلة. إذا ممكن بس الإخوان الحارس والشباب، إذا ممكن بس المايك يكون هون. فاللي معنيين يسألوا رجاء ممكن يتوجهوا لوين الميكروفون بالنص. شغال. إذا ممكن بس المايك اللي بالنص بالكنترول.
تست اوكي. زيد عم علي، دائرة الدبلوماسية والسياسات العامة منظمة التحرير. So my question is to Mr. Jonathan regarding the GDPR law. So my question is, could states or organizations evade this law under the pretext of national security, knowing that nowadays it is a widely used excuse regarding issues such as terrorism? Thank you.
بنكمل بأسئلة. تفضلي.
مرحبا، ديما سمارة من الأكسس ناو فرع تونس. برضو بدي أسأل السيد جوناثان، تأثير الحق في نسيان المعلومات أو the right to be forgotten شو معناه بالضبط؟ لأنه بالتطبيق العام حسب الإيو مش مطبق صح. هل معناه رح يتم محو المعطيات نهائيا من الجوجل أو معناها المحركات البحث، ولا معناها إشي تاني؟ فإذا بيقدر يشرح لنا أكثر عن الموضوع. شكرا.
شكرا. تفضل.
شكرا. بدي أسأل هلا إذا واحد عنده موقع وتم حذفه، أو مثلا زي ما حكوا إنه 35 موقع ممنوعين السلطة منعتهم، هل ممكن تتدخل بجوجل أو أي مؤسسة حقوق إنسان أو العفو الدولية عشان ترجع هاي المواقع، تضغط على السلطة عشان ترجع؟ والسؤال الآخر إنه قضية يعني الإرهاب كفلسطيني، أنا ما بهمني العالم شو بيحكي عني، أنا هون في احتلال في مقاومة بأي طريقة في مقاومة. الإرهاب هو الذي يعتدي على الدول، الإرهاب هو الذي يستخدم الكيماوي ويستخدم النووي ويستغل الشعوب إفريقيا وآسيا وأوروبا. هذا هو الإرهاب. الإرهاب هو الذي يمنع الناس الذين خارجون بالقوارب من أن يصل ألمانيا أو فرنسا، لأن هؤلاء هم نتيجة للاستعمار الذي كان في بلادهم قبل 100 سنة. هذا هو الإرهاب. أما الفلسطيني أو اللبناني أو العراقي أو الأفغاني أو ينصف بالإرهاب لأنه عربي أو مسلم، هذا مفارقة. أما قضية حتى لو صار حدث في دول برا، مثلا شخص قام بقتل، يعني في قبل عدة أشهر يهودي
بس خلينا
أمريكي
نلزم بأسئلة لو
ماشي
سمحت.
يهودي أمريكي قام بدخول كنيسة يهودي وقتل 20 أو 12 شخص. ترامب قال ليس إرهاب، هذا عنف، بينما ما قام به فلسطيني أو مسلم أو عربي أو حتى من أمريكا اللاتينية أو أفريقي فوراً سوف يوصف بالإرهاب. لماذا هذه الازدواجية في المعارف الغرب تجاه العالم الثالث؟ لماذا؟
شكراً. كمان سؤال أليسون؟
Yeah, I'm Alison from Hamlet. I just wanted to speak because as we're developing the conference, there's this tension between knowing all about the violations, knowing how much data is being taken, things that are very scary, right? But at the same time, we're trying to protect the right to speak out and freedom of expression. So where is the safe space? If you can speak about what is safe for people to do, or what precautions or ways they can take to be more safe, then that would be helpful. Thank you.
شكرا. نبدأ من جوناثان في الآخرين عندهم ملاحظات.
Okay. Just starting with the first question on national security and terrorism. The thing to bear in mind with the GDPR is that it only applies to kind of areas of law that EU law is applicable to. I'm not probably explaining this very well. So policing and certain government activities mightn't necessarily be regulated explicitly by the law. It's up for certain countries to bring in their own laws in that regard. So in terms of, I think the national security and terrorism issue might be a separate point. A number of countries around the world, including in the EU, have different laws or regulations that dictate when data is disclosed to law authorities, basically the police, and unfortunately in that particular area there are huge gaps, and privacy and data protection is in my opinion not sufficiently protected in many jurisdictions, and sometimes because there is a lack of regulation, some media companies, social media companies, ICT organizations disclose the data to the law authorities without even considering what the law might be. They just hand it over. They get a request from those responsible for policing in a country, and they'll follow it or abide by it. So I think it's an interesting area just to look at in a bit more detail, and here and I would say in other countries, to see whether data is sufficiently protected in that relationship, the relationship between private entities and law enforcement. Unfortunately, it just falls outside the GDPR, really. And on the right to be forgotten, if I'm remembering correctly, the question is what is it? And that's actually a very good question, because we hear this terminology quite a lot, the right to be forgotten, and it sounds like it's your right to get any information about you removed from the internet, so to speak, which is not quite accurate. Basically, it's a right to have information de-indexed from databases, essentially like search engine sites, where that data is unlawful. So if it's irrelevant or inaccurate or doesn't comply with data protection laws. So it's actually a very specific type of data that you can request to be removed from search engines. It's not any data. Unfortunately, again, which has come up time and time again when we've been speaking, there's a lack of transparency here. And it's often Google and private entities that are judge and jury in determining what has to come down and what has to be delisted, and that's the real issue here. It might be this specific law is being abused by both individuals complaining to search engines and also the search engines themselves. And we need to find a way to ensure that there is more transparency in how this very unique kind of legal right is enforced, to ensure that it's not interfering or violating with free speech.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any other comments from the other speakers?
Yeah, just in response to the colleague from Access Now, in terms of what you can do around the internet, obviously don't be scared of it just because governments have the capability to spy on internet use doesn't mean they're constantly going to be doing it. The key thing to keep in mind is that it depends who you're worried about and what you're worried about also. So if your main threat is, for example, a partner who might be wanting to see who you're messaging and your internet usage habits, then the steps you take are very different to what steps you need to take if your main potential worry is the Israeli or the Palestinian police. So you have to take those things into account and adjust your behavior and take precautions, very much depending on what you're trying to keep secret and who you're trying to keep it secret from. And to help with that, myself and my colleague Ed, who's sitting over there, will be providing a workshop tomorrow in Ramallah that can help with trying to think about some of these threats which you might face and how to go about combating them and safeguarding yourself online.
شكرا لجميع المتحدثين، وهيك بننهي الجلسة الثانية.
من قليل الجلسة الثالثة هالقد محمسة وفيها طاقة، فإذا بتحبوا نروح باستراحة سريعة وبعدين رح نسمع تجربة ملهمة. وكمان يعني في الجلسة الأولى والثانية كان في حديث عن الواقع، عن التحديات، تشخيص. الجلسة الثالثة فيها انطلاق وحرية وتحرير لكل هاي القيود، ونسمع أكثر من تجارب شبابية كيف استثمروا فعلا في الأدوات الرقمية. فاستراحة سريعة وتعالوا.